our first question tonight, for 100 points, for Joe. So what was the moment when you really knew that you were going to make it?
I'm gonna make it.
You're going to make it. When you knew, you're past kind of like the initial struggles, and you figured, hey, I just reached that moment where now I can see the success coming.
That's a tough question. You never know. As a founder, right, you struggle with so many things. But I think that the only thing you feel like you can make it is your customer is so happy. As long as your customer is happy, your users are happy, that's all about. So obviously, financially, if the company go IPO, I think that day you feel like you like feel like a millionaire, right? Billionaire. So that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was like your initial inspiration that led you to say, okay, I'm going with Zenlayer. That's my thing.
It's very simple. When I founded the company, because I'm a gamer, I noticed when I play a game, it's so slow. I'm struggling. I want to make the experience better. That's it, right? So that's where I started. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, now for 300 points, we're going to go to Alex over here. And so for you, what gave you the idea? Were you sitting in a dorm room and you were hungry? Is that the story?
Yeah, pretty much. So a little bit background, I was like born and raised in China, mainland China, and went to study abroad in US in 2007. Like somehow I end up in Kansas. Like I don't know how many of you like ever been to Kansas? Like middle of nowhere, corn farm, no Ranch 99, no H Mart. The most authentic Chinese restaurant in my college town is Panda Express. So my life was miserable. But like personally, I'm a guy, I can live with like Chipotle, right? It's like kind of like tastes like Chinese food. But yeah, but I saw
being recorded, right?
But I saw a lot of like my friends, classmates, like also from Asia, like Japan, Korea, China. They drive like multiple hours just to try like find like Asian supermarket, Asian grocery stores. Then like after I graduated from college, I moved to Los Angeles. I see all the like Asian populations here. Like doesn't make sense for us. Like for me, there's no like e-commerce solution. Like that was like 2012 already, right? In China, we have JD, we have Alibaba. In States, we have like Amazon, eBay, but nobody actually focus on like Asian product for overseas. Like at the beginning, like I saw like it was a business. Like I didn't run it as a startup. I didn't try to raise money. It was just like, at least it's a business can benefit the customer or the students like me, who live in America, without access to their like product they grew up with. Yeah, that was my idea. Yeah.
So when you started, like day one, you're like, okay, we're gonna do the business, and you pick the name, and then you're like, what's next? What was like the first thing that you had to do?
It's exactly what I did. Like, what's the name? Right? And then I don't have like computer background, so I don't know how to, put up an e-commerce like website. So I tried to ask all my friends, like, do you know anybody graduate from Kansas, live in Los Angeles with a computer science major? I did find one, and yeah. So that's the first two things. Then just like I spent almost a month, go to Ranch 99 every day, try to see what kind of product they carry, what kind of product like they are missing, like that's all. Yeah. Then I just rent a really small warehouse, like 3,000 square feet. That's how I started.
It's a pretty good size. Yeah. What size is your warehouse today?
Yeah, we have multiple warehouses, like over 400,000 like square feet.
Wow. So if you think about that 3,000 moment to 400,000 square foot moment, And if I think back to the first question I asked Joe about what was that tipping point moment where you figured out, hey, this is really going to take off, this is going to happen. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, I was like thinking about this question, like feel sorry for myself. Like I still like don't have this kind of feeling, but I have multiple times like we may not able to survive, right? Like until today, just like someday, right? It's like I don't know, just like I never get that feeling. Like the business keep growing, 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 but for some reasons, like I always feel like maybe someday, like you don't know, right? I always have this like things behind me. You have to work harder, right? Bring the company to the next level. Otherwise, you know, you could be the next company that your VC read off on their book.
Well, I think that's what makes you successful. Same with Joe as well. I think the fact that you're always kind of worried about that next day is probably what propels you to success. So moving over to Rebecca, and why don't we start with the inspiration, for Saga. When you woke up that morning and said, okay, this is my next thing. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, so the origin story of Saga is interesting because, and I sort of want to piggyback off of the last wonderful panel, Katie and crew. That was incredible. I felt that as a female founder. So Saga, I will freely admit, the original idea was not mine, even though I'm the co-founder CEO. So Saga is, it's a highly technical product within Web3, and it is meant to be a combination of AWS and NVIDIA, but for Web3. And so the original team that came up with the idea, they were trying to solve a technology problem. And the reason why I was introduced to them was one of my co-founders in my last crypto startup was friends with this team. And he was like, it's a great problem statement. And the idea for solving it is there. They just don't know what they're doing. So can you talk to them? Okay. So I talked to them, and I think what became immediately clear was this is a team that they're great technologists, but in terms of understanding how to build a product, how to scale it, how to create a business that can define a market, no one had any experience in that, and they didn't quite know how to frame that exercise. And I saw the potential there. And so, what was that moment when I woke up and said, this is what I'm going to do? I think it's when I had the conversations with the team, and I felt like this is a problem that is worth solving, and given the experience that I have, I can actually do this. So it was a little different for me, but that's the origin story.
So what's the I guess, main thing that you think about like day in and day out with Saga, that this is the thing that I need to focus on most?
That's a great question because we are in our launch phase right now. So the unique thing about Web3 protocols is that the day you go, I have to be careful here, the day your token goes live and the day your product goes live are one and the same. So it's different for other technology companies, but because we are in the thick of it right now, the thing that I'm focused on is making sure that that is successful. And what does that look like? So what Saga has set out to do from the very, very beginning is make sure that we build something very cutting edge in Web3, really take that technology space forward, but at the same time, build something that means something to the real world. And that is an incredibly tough bridge to cross because I'm sure many of you, if you've tried to use a crypto product, if you're aware of crypto products, you know just how kind of crappy they are. They're not focused on user experience. Doesn't matter how wealthy they make you. You can tell that the product itself is not great. And the community of technologists within Web3 is incredibly, incredibly insular. And at the same time, there is this longing for relevance in the real world. There is a longing to be in gaming and entertainment and to be culturally relevant. And one of the things that I felt very deeply ever since co-founding Saga is that the potential is there to cross that bridge, but you really have to be vigilant and tough and strong enough to stay focused on that vision because there isn't really like a strong pull right now, let's say, from the real world, and there certainly is not a strong push from crypto. So it really takes leadership, and honestly, day in, day out, I think about crossing that bridge.
Great, very inspiring. Okay, moving over to you. Aside from Rotten Tomatoes, sorry, but we all know Rotten Tomatoes, it's great. Aside from Rotten Tomatoes, what of your many serial startups is the one that you're most proud of?
Good question. I think right now, the one I'm working on now, I find very exciting. We're trying to build a community around like geek fandom, comic books, video games, anime, sci-fi, fantasy. These are all categories that I've loved since I was a kid. When I was a kid, those were things that were like made you weird and an outcast, and now everyone watches all that stuff. They play games like it's all very normal, and so and this is something I'm doing with a lot of my really good friends that I've known for a decade plus, and also because we're building this community, we're getting these really interesting folks together that I'm a fan of all of them, to get together, to have them engage and connect with each other. And it's just, I've always loved fandom. I've always loved community. And seeing it kind of mesh together is really amazing. So I'm very proud of this one. I'm very excited by this one.
Can you share with us kind of what stage you're in right now with the company?
It's still very early. We raised some money, and we're like one by one, like handpicking and bringing these folks into the community. We're 50-something, 60 people now, and we've done a few events kind of to support this community. We've done 3, like basically 1 per quarter. The last one we did was actually here at Rideback. I think a number of folks here actually attended. So it's still early, but I think as you're talking about like how can you tell when something's working, I would say across all my companies, or when I see for other companies, is it's a good sign when you see folks telling other people about your product without you asking them to. Like you don't give them any incentive to, but they just do it. We saw that with Rotten Tomatoes early on. I'm starting to see that now with our current company, and I think that's always a good sign that you probably found something that looks like product market fit, and so you have a pretty good chance of making it at that point.
Do you have a kind of a unique way that you make decisions? Or is there a way that you come about deciding, am I going to go left? Am I going to go right? Am I going to go for 3,000 or 400,000 views?
Yeah, I would say a couple things is one, in general, I believe very strongly in focus. So I think the more you can kind of simplify what you're trying to do, the better chance it has of succeeding. Like Rotten Tomatoes was just movie reviews. And lots of companies, almost every company you can think of when you go to the beginning, they're always very, very simple. They do one thing, basically. So that's one thing we do on the decision-making side. The other thing is, working with Holly and my other co-founders, is really try to, we all have our different opinions, put it out there, talk it through. We don't put things to a vote, and really just discuss it until we find something that we think is the best solution. Yeah.
Great advice. So Rebecca, I'm going to ask you the very same question. How do you make decisions?
Well, the reason why I'm pausing here is, so the co-founders at this point, because we are in this very critical period, we have a daily stand-up. We don't usually. Everyone's pretty autonomous. But now we talk to each other for at least an hour every day. And one of my co-founders, who, he meant this in the nicest way possible, said, "You're more authoritarian than I am." And I was like, well, yes, because I'm the CEO. So I would say this. I am one of those people where I'm very action-oriented, and I would rather cycle through many actions as opposed to wait a long time to take an action. And so when it comes to decision-making within Saga, certainly, people have their own areas of expertise, and they have a lot of autonomy to pursue those areas. But at the end of the day, if it comes to my desk, I make a decision very quickly. If it ends up being wrong, I'll correct it the next time. But it's important just to keep moving quickly in our particular industry. So, I mean, decisions, I would say if there's one characteristic of all decisions made at Saga, they just happen very quickly. And then we keep iterating and improving until we get to the right answer. But I think for many startups, that would also be true.
It sounds like you're very consistent and deliberate, and so your team knows that, and that probably helps you guys evolve and know that if you need to pivot, they know how to work with your decision-making process pretty effectively, it sounds like.
Yes, no, Bennett, that's a very charitable way of putting it, so thank you. You're
welcome.
No, I think at this point, maybe because, so in order to make a decision, it's not like, somebody sits in a corner and just comes up with a decision. There's lots of discussion happening. There are lots of moving parts within the project, and there's, a lot of people need to talk to one another in order to make something happen. And I think that when you force people into the exercise of making decisions quite frequently, that process of discussion iteration also happens very frequently. And so at this point, after 1.5 years, we all know each other pretty well. And so I wouldn't go so far as to say we can read each other's minds, but we more or less know how people will react to things, what people are going to say when they hear certain inputs. And so, yes, we are reaching that rhythm, if you will, as an organization.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm going to stick with this theme, Alex. So what's your decision-making process?
I tend not to make like too many decisions. Like nowadays, I learned this like from hard ways. Like back days, like when I first start the company, first couple of years, like I basically make all the decisions by myself, right? It's like I was like super busy. Others just put it in the executions. But right now, I think like let other people make decisions because they are close to the front line, close to the customers. Pretty much my time is on the strategy, on the cash flow, on the talent, right? That's all. And also, I tend to make decisions from like customer perspective, like what customer really want, right? What's the one thing unique like you can offer to your customers, right? Like there's Amazon, there's Walmart, there's others. Like what unique about Yami, right? Just hold on this one thing. So like always from customer perspective.
Thanks. Hey, Joe, I'll give you have an option. You can either talk about your decision-making or you can talk about what you spend your day doing. Or you can do both, because this stuff is gold.
Yeah,
I can see people taking notes. This is good stuff.
I will choose the second option. So actually, my day is quite simple. When I woke up every morning, actually, I like to make coffee. I'm really serious about coffee. Okay, so pour over espresso. In the morning, you do espresso. If you in the afternoon you do espresso, that's something's wrong with you, right? So, okay, yeah, I start with coffee, and then I tend to go to the office very early. Start like give me myself like a 1 hour time to sort through a bunch of things, right? Then I normally I have a 15 minutes chat with my direct report. So what's going on basically, right? I don't make a lot of decisions nowadays, but more of a give guidance, say why we should do this, why we shouldn't do this. It mainly based on a couple of principles. One is we want to build a large distributed network. Are we covering the 90? We want to cover 95% of the internet population within 25 milliseconds. Are we reaching that goal? Close to that goal. The second is there any customer is not happy? Because we do have internal monitoring system. You bet every day you have unhappy customers. Let's talk about this, what's going on. And I actually, then lunchtime I take a nap. I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah. Because I actually travel a lot, right? I spend more than 180 days in the hotel. It's sad, actually, okay? It's not.
What cities?
Oh, really globally. Actually, I was just coming back in U.S. I was in Vietnam, Korea, China, Singapore last 3 weeks. So as you can imagine, right? So anyway, so because I travel a lot, I try to deal with jet lag. I don't deal with it. So if I feel like I need to sleep, I sleep. Right? Like this morning, I woke up at 3 o'clock. I start working. Yeah. So anyway, I take a nap, and then in the afternoon I go to the office, kind of have a couple of meetings, and also like 4 o'clock I start reading all my notes. I use a Notion. I don't know anyone use it. It's a great product. A Notion. I sort through all my notes in there. I try to check if anything I haven't done today. Should check it off. Yeah, that's pretty much my normal days.
You know, when you fly to Asia, are you totally fine? Is it just coming back that you have the jet lag? Because that's what happens to me. I'll come back 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm up, and I'm like wide awake.
Yeah.
And then I start sending them emails, and they're like, oh my God. And then I'm wondering, why are you guys awake? But
By the way, that's I usually used to check emails at like 3 o'clock and the reply emails. I don't do that anymore because my employees, my lieutenants, they said, this is very stressful. You send me a text message at 3 a.m. So I tend to hold on to that until like 7 o'clock.
well, I'm just kind of gleaning from what you said that routines are really important. And in that routine is where you are probably able to find like peace in your rhythm and get clarity of thought.
That's right. And as you can see, I didn't mention I running or anything, exercise. That's bad. I shouldn't do that.
I was watching that Beckham documentary on Netflix, and so I was talking about it with some friends afterward, and someone asked me, they're like, my God, like, why is David Beckham cleaning his grill? Like, can't he have someone do that for him? And I'm like, nah, this guy's a routine guy. Because he used to train so hard since he was probably 8 years old, and through his entire career, and each day he'd have rhythm. So I can tell, he's in the back cleaning the grill. You guys saw this. That's where he's getting peace. He wants to be the guy cleaning the grill because that's his routine. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask your routine. But the toughest question of the night, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to do a startup and they're coming to you and saying, what advice would you give me?
I mentioned before about focus. I think that's super important in general for anyone who's doing any kind of business. But I think someone mentioned it earlier on the second panel about like not overthinking things. I see a lot of people where they psych themselves out. Like if you're doing a tech company, I'm like, don't spend more than a week maximum, but even an hour or two, you can probably Google and figure out like every competitor that you have. And a lot of times when they over-research, they overthink, they'll convince themselves not to do it. Either they find companies that are doing what they're doing that are way bigger, and they're going to be like, oh, they're too big, there's no way we can compete. Or they'll find the companies that are doing what they're doing, but they died or are like near death. And they're like, oh, look, they did my idea and it failed, I shouldn't do it. But you look at something like Facebook, they could have looked at Friendster and said, well, look, Friendster did it, it didn't work. Or at the time they came out, they could have looked at MySpace and be like, look, MySpace is huge, we shouldn't do it. Or Google, same thing. They could have looked at like Alta Vista and be like, oh, search engines don't work. Or they could have looked at Yahoo and said, oh, they're so big, we shouldn't do it. But you just have to like do it. You just have to get it out there, make decisions quick, and then figure it out from there and keep going and then see if some people actually start using your product. But a lot of folks, they talk about it, they think about it, they research it, and they never do it. So you just actually have to go out and do it and not overthink it.
So it's like the focus, keeping it simple, and this doing it is also kind of having that confidence to move forward.
Even if you don't have confidence, just move forward.
That's the best advice of the day. All right, Rebecca, what advice would you give to any of us?
I would 100% second that. Even if your heart is beating and you're like breathing shallowly, just do it. Go for it. That is the best advice of the night. So the advice that I give won't be as good as that, but it's sort of related, which is So I actually live up in Silicon Valley, and all my life, I remember startup founders being lionized. And if you like live in Silicon Valley, the expectation is either you found a startup or you are part of a startup. And I think that the life of a startup founder is over glamorized. So oftentimes in the media, we see the ones who like really made it big, the decacorns, the centacorns, et cetera. And I think what a lot of startup founders believe when they start their journey is, okay, in a couple years, I'm going to be Elon Musk. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, first off, right? If you are like moderately successful within a 5 to 10 year time frame, that's already really great. You've beat the odds. The odds are overwhelmingly that this project or this company is going to fail. You're going to go bankrupt. You're going to have to wind down. The results are not glamorous most of the time. And so the only reason you would do a startup is not necessarily to get rich. It is because you see a problem in the market and either you feel it personally or just incredibly passionate about it, and you are willing to work incredibly hard to face the emotional distress of thinking that you might die at any given point. And you're willing to do that for multiple years at a time. And not only are you willing to do that, but on days when the reality is not great, you have to put on that brave face for your team. You can say something else to your closest investors, to your family, to your close friends, but for your team, they are only as happy as you on any given day. They are only as hardworking and as energetic as you. And so the burden is enormous. So I would just say that if you really want to do that startup, go for it, but just be aware of what you're getting into. And I think once you think through that and you have the conviction, you're like, you know what, I understand that it's tough, but I'm going to go for it anyway. That's what's going to carry you through your journey. Most of the startups that succeed, it's a combination of smarts, yes, but really a lot of luck. Your timing has to be right for the market, and it's just guts. At the end of the day, it really is just baking that confidence when you don't have it, and when you do have it, just running with it. That's the advice I have.
That is great advice. So I really appreciate what you said about modeling the behavior, because what you do is what everybody else is going to do. I think that's terrific advice. Alex, what advice do you have?
I think my first advice is pretty much the same. Just like don't think too much, just do it. Like I got asked a lot of like what if this happened, what if that happened? Like I was like, you're far away from this problem, right? Like your next problem is register the company, figure out the name. It's even hard to find a unique name in California, right? So yeah, they ask me a lot of questions. Like I think sometimes they just like scare themselves. They actually never started, right? That's the most common problem I saw. Second is like do it as a business, not a startup. Like startup is a business, right? A lot of like people ask me like how you raise your first round, like when I should raise, like what kind of investor, how many shares I should give up first rounds. Like wait, I think right now you have to focus on your business. It's not on the money, right? You have to chase your customer, not like VCs, right? If you have like sustainable business, the money will come, right? Just like raise money is not part of the business actually, right? It's actually can help you grow the business, but you have to focus on your customer, focus on your business. So I was like, I don't know why like so many people just like think about like startup is about raising money, like business is about making money.
I think you definitely have your priorities right. And I guess also what I kind of gleaned from you from the answer before, which would probably go into this advice column, sounds like you're a really good delegator and you make good hiring decisions and you really trust the people who you hire. And that's how you're able to focus on the things that are most important to you. Does that sound right?
Yes and no.
But it sounded pretty good though, right? You should have gone with that.
Time to time, yeah. But Again, I actually learned this from a hard way, like 2008, 2019, 2018, 2019. Like my company was like almost ran out of money in our best day. Like we grow super fast, but like for a lot of reasons, like we almost like run out of the money. I was like went through a really hard time, like think about myself, just like then I realized like I just like care too much things like product, inventories, like marketing, everything. But as a CEO, there's literally one thing like nobody can do for me, just like make sure there's money in the bank. I fail to do this, right?
I should have done that for you. It's my job.
Yeah, so then lessons learned is like only focus on the things like nobody can do it for you, but let people do like what they do better.
So Joe, what advice do you have?
Yeah, just do it, right? Because you're asking all the founders here, so we're curious, we're ruthless. So, but ultimately, I do have one thing is when I make a tough decision is I kind of like move the time forward 3 years or 5 years. Means think about if 5 years later, are you going to regret you didn't do this? If you do, you should do it. Right? Because life is short. Why waste it, right?
That is brilliant. See, aren't you glad that I asked you that question? Because you thought of something no one else said, which is great. And speaking of that, I think it's time to go to the question and answer period. So do we have any brave souls who want to ask these terrific folks? Oh, we have so many. Okay. Jing, I think, well, over here. Okay.
Hi. So as founders, I'm curious to hear when you think about your company, number one, what does success look like for you? And when you are on the path, do you think about what's your end goal? So you talk about perhaps money is not important to you. Do you think about is there an exit strategy? So what does success look like? And do you start with the end in mind?
I can go first. Yeah, so the exit strategy for my company, obviously, go IPO. This is the second company I plan to take an IPO. I already done one. But to measure the success is really to make the global internet users happier, good experience, right? Cover 90%, 95% of the internet user within 25 milliseconds. That's my end goal in a sense, right? But also, maybe I'm a little bit different than Alex. I want to make a lot of money, okay? But my professor said, make a decent money decently. That's most important.
Yeah, I didn't think about this question when I started the company. I just like think about like the customer I can fulfill. But since we already raised like multiple rounds, like this is a question I have to think about. Like I think either just like buy out or just go IPO. But for me or for the team, it's just like matter of size. The reason like matter of size is not about like money. I think when I think about this question, it's like there's multiple stage. Like maybe in this stage, if I buy out by another big company, I'm pretty much don't have to worry about like my life, right? But if we can grow a little bit bigger, maybe the people like maybe around like 20, 30 people around me, they don't have to worry about life and they never regret joining the company. And my goal is like maybe just like someday every single individual ever join our company, have our shares, feel okay, this is the best decision they made, right? So I think just like this, it's not about money, it's about like, the people around me.
Yeah, those are both great answers. And thank you for giving me time to think of my answer because I didn't have one when you asked the question. So what does success look like? So Saga's tagline is, this is a space where the crazies can come dream their craziest dreams and feel loved and supported. And so the people who use the Saga protocol, the direct users, are actually developers. So they're the ones who are building the games and the NFT projects, sometimes DeFi projects as well. But the goal is to be very, very developer-centric. So whatever a developer needs in order to successfully build their application, but also to grow that application as a business, because they're all businesses, we want them to be able to come to Saga and feel like they can achieve the moon. So that is a very qualitative goal, but already we've really worked hard to build that into our brand, and as we get closer and closer to launch, we see that it's really bearing fruit, and that's just amazingly gratifying. In terms of the end state, so again, with respect to Web3 projects, they work a little bit differently in the sense that when the token goes live, the product also goes live. And so liquidity is achieved way earlier in the cycle. There are almost never, ever any sort of M&A activities with respect to Web3 projects unless they don't have a token, just because the market for M&A and tokens is not yet mature. But I think for Saga, what I would really love is, I know this is being recorded, so I want to put this delicately, but I really do hope that we end up flipping the tokens that are used for purely speculative value. And for people in crypto who might be watching this one day, they know exactly what I mean by that. I'm not actually going to name the tokens that are used purely for speculation. But I think for a long time, crypto has been really supported and buttressed and grown by people who are hopeful that by holding a token, they're going to become rich overnight, or maybe they just love the game of this volatility and token prices. And that is a core part of the industry, and I deeply respect that, and it is a part of who we are as people in crypto. But having said that, that is not ultimately what delivers something meaningful to the world. And so I really hope that by coming at it through the angle that we have, that we ultimately provide something that is more valuable than speculation. So again, very qualitative, but that's what I think about every day when we're doing what we're doing as a project.
I guess for me, I think about impact. So it could be something like Rotten Tomatoes that affects a lot of people. It's a small impact, but for a lot of people. Or what we're doing now, where there's very few people, but hopefully we can have a more impact per person. Right now, I find when I see people and they can make new friendships or work together or support one another or invest in each other, I find that very exciting. As far as the end game of what we're doing now, we're just thinking about the next step, but I think it would be amazing if we get ourselves to something that looks like TED, except more narrow around fandom.
Thanks for the nice question. It actually turned into eight questions, so that was pretty good. So we have time for one last question, which I think is Jing.
Well, actually, I had exactly the same question, like how do you measure?
Exactly the same
But
words.
I will have an add-on question for you. So as you have been through, Patrick, you have been through several rounds of these different investments, and I'm sure there are moments there are key investors in your business whose definition of success is not necessarily completely aligned with yours. And it's applied for all the founders on the stage here. So what do you do to win them over? How do you narrow the gap between the investor's definition of success and yours?
Well, I mean, for me, I think I've been lucky where we're just getting folks who want to support what we're doing. And I mean, to be honest, they're mostly support checks. So they just want you to do what you're doing. They're not so worried about, they hope that something goes well, but I don't think there's necessarily that kind of gap for us.
Did you ask your husband the same question?
He is as successful as anyone on the stage. Yes, I will.
All right, I'll go next. Yes, logically, Patrick, thank you. So we kind of just went through this exercise, or I personally just went through this exercise because we just closed a round, and it's bear market right now, and so it's no secret that any round is difficult to close in this environment. And investor relations, that term we often think of as a public company term, that once you go public, that you have a department that does investor relations, that there are certain documents that you have to put out there, certain reports that you have to put out on a regular basis. And so it's a function, it's a profession, it's a thing that you have to take care of as a company. But the truth of the matter is that investor relations exist at every stage. It may not be as formal for private companies, but it's there. And so I think what can happen is, you have investors who work with you, like the ones that Patrick just described, who really do support you, whom you become friends with, and you can be a little more candid with. But that's not the majority of investors out there, I would say. Most investors, and again, this is entirely legitimate, it's their right, they're after the return. And so I would think as a founder about investor relations early on. So yes, investors are there to add value. You probably hear that a lot, to support you through your journey as a startup founder. But the vast majority of them need to be managed, just as you would investor relations, as you would any analyst. I would keep that in mind as a founder.
We're going to let you guys off the hook because they said we're done. But I want to thank Joe and Alex and Rebecca and Patrick. This was really terrific. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.